Good morning. It's Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. And I'm going to speak for a few minutes today about connection based on questions that some of the members have been asking, and based as always on my own practice and reflection as I'm working with the same themes that we've been discussing all month and meditating with all month. So the enlightenment path teaches that we must cultivate our awareness first. Before doing any of the other big work of life, we have to make sure that we're receiving information directly from life. And what we learn is that what we really see fully, we can also love. And what I've seen happening in my own practice, in my own life, is often I'm working really hard to try to learn how to love, how to be better at loving, how to be better at all sorts of things, right? I'm so busy kind of perfecting myself or trying to perfect the world around me that I spend less of my precious time, attention, energy being aware and just seeing. I have taught in this space the four abodes, the four flavors of love that come up in both yoga and Buddhism, four different ways that a natural loving response can come about. And those ways are friendliness, compassion, joyful celebration of somebody else's success, and equanimity is the fourth one, right? And in this last week, it's really occurred to me that these are all four totally naturally arising unless we've got some kind of wound or we're in some kind of situation where these natural responses are stunted, challenged, and absolutely that happens to all of us along the path. But those reactions do come naturally in most scenarios that you're in. The connections, the relationships where we have problems, where it's really challenging to bring forth our natural loving responses in all of their flavors. Those tend to be the relationships that people are doing their inquiry about right now. Those are the relationships that people are really kind of investigating, which is perfect, which is exactly right, because somewhere in those connections, you're going to discover that there are some stories and some beliefs and probably just some conditioning and patterns that you've developed that are asking for your attention, that are making your, not just that relationship you're investigating, but other relationships as well, challenging. Last week, Judy asked a really great question about, she said, can I feel multiple loving responses, right? Are there multiple abodes basically that I could enter into for one relationship? And I did answer that last week, but I'm going to answer it slightly differently this week because I realized after we got off the line that that working with that suffering square, which a lot of you have worked with, can really help us see how absolutely this is true. So the suffering square, of course, relates back to those four abodes. The suffering square helps us see that anytime that we are in kind of conflicting relationship, a challenging relationship with somebody else, that we tend to be trying to identify ourselves as one of these four roles. We want to identify ourselves as the hero, or we want to identify ourselves as the villain, the bad guy, right? And you might say, does anyone identify as the bad guy? All the time. What are you doing when you beat yourself up because you were late for an appointment? Right? What do you, it's like we do this all the time. But the hero or the villain, if you want to grab something that has more empowerment, that actually is making things happen, or we tend to be stuck in either the darling, the one that is privileged and gets the treats, or the victim, the one who's being denied or abused, mistreated, unjustly treated. And so the whole point of all of that is it's natural for us to, at different times, take those different roles. When we're going to be suffering is when we're clinging to one of those roles and we're not accepting that actually we move among them. Actually, we can be all of them, any of them. Apply this to somebody else, right? When they come into your space, what are you labeling them? And the problem with the suffering square or any kind of really reductionary, overly simplistic thinking is that it takes away the fullness of our experience. It takes away the truth that we are all of these things and none of these things. The problem isn't that we experience sometimes victimhood or herodom, that's all fine. When we suffer is when we start to identify as that. This is who I am. If I'm not the hero in this scenario, I must not be a good person, right? Whatever stories come from that. I must not be me. And so in most scenarios, right? So let's think of a scenario, for instance, where someone is being mean to us, right? Or somebody is really struggling but not accepting our help. I can at the same time see that there's maybe a victim role that's happening there where they can't get out of their suffering. And I can have the natural loving response when I see victimhood, which is compassion. I can also see that they are playing the villain, right, by not, by kind of denying their inner self help, or by telling themselves, by listening to that inner critic and just, So what do we apply when we see a villain? Equanimity, a little space, right? We actually try not to jump right into helping. We try not to jump right into judgment. We give it that space of equanimity. We assume there's some bigger process at play that maybe we don't totally understand. We celebrate when we see somebody, when we see the hero, right? We have joyous celebration for that. And we can experience all of these things with one person in one conversation, in one moment even. And I think if you're struggling in a relationship with someone, something that I might do is first just bring some awareness before you try to love them better or help them or save them, or try to figure out how to make yourself feel better, right? Before we go in toward any of those actions, bring awareness to it. I would do some kind of inquiry practice around maybe how they're exhibiting the different parts and your responses to those parts, And the biggest thing that I actually came to say this week is that if you keep returning your awareness to your experience, if you keep noticing inside how you're responding naturally, right? And you can really just observe that, the loving response will happen naturally. It might take a little time. You might really have to sit with some stuff or do some inquiry or do some more meditation. But that the loving response will happen naturally when it's ready. And if it's really hard to be loving towards someone else in a moment, guess what? Maybe that's perfect. Because it's possible that in overly accommodating somebody else's needs, you're actually abandoning one of your inner parts. And it is good and right that that inner part, even if its tactics aren't great, is helping keep some of your resources for yourself. I heard this really great quote earlier in this week, which I can't attribute because somebody said it and they didn't know who they heard it from, but I'm going to share it anyway, because that's how these things get passed around, right? Don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. And I realized that I've done this for a lot of my life, all my life. I'm going to answer that question in a sec. Thanks, Veta. And what I've come to realize is that I lost the capacity personally to really, truly listen within. I stopped being able to really see myself, my own wants and needs that this incredible body tells us at any given moment. I was and this started so young that my survival really did depend on my parents being able to take care of me. And my solution was to take care of them all the time. And then when I had brothers, take care of them and to take care, see, what does my teacher want? I will be that, right? And that inner listening stopped being possible. I didn't even realize when I was setting myself on fire because I had lost the capacity to be the sensitivity to when I was in pain. So we've got a couple questions here that I'm going to answer. So one is, when becoming aware of raga, and that means an anxious attachment. That means when we are, well, like I was when I was little with my parents, I was so preoccupied with whether or not they were going to stay and love me and take care of me, that I formed something called anxious attachment. And attachment styles is a really great thing to look into if you're curious. I've learned a lot from it, and it very directly sinks into all of these yogic and Buddhist teachings that we've been talking about. But an anxious attachment style is one where we're so overly concerned with other people loving us and supporting us and giving us what we need that we become codependent, we become embroiled, we lose that sense of boundary between self and other. And so the question here is, how do we disentangle or create boundaries without going reactive, drama cycle, can you believe they, blah, 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 right? How to stay soft. So I love that question. And first, I would say, observing that everything you do is an act of love. It may be an act of confused love, right? And if you're in anxious attachment, if you're in a raga kind of state, clinging to the other, you will likely be in a mode where you're overly aware of the other person's the other person's needs and boundaries and not aware enough of your own. And so one thing that you can do is just say, as an act of love for me, for Erin, or for some part that I've identified inside of Erin, as an act of love to her, I'm going to make space from this entanglement. And I will also say that sometimes, depending on the nature of that attachment and entanglement, anger is actually healthy. And especially if that entanglement has been toxic in various ways for the parties involved, and especially before we come to really understand and have perspective on it, anger is actually a very healthy and natural care response. Anger is a form of love in that case. But what I really urge you to do is remember that it's love, which means you're not going to lash out at somebody else with it, right? Or at yourself. It means you're going to be able to have some safe, healthy space to express that anger. And then do your best to return lovingly again to nurturing whatever part of the inner self is really needing it. And then when the self is nurtured and the self is whole, it's very easy to go around the world loving. It just happens. So and the one last thing I'd say, that last question is, it can really help to talk with somebody who's not that other party and go through it with them. Some of the prompts from last month we were talking about right relationship was find somebody to go and either straight up role play with, or just talk it out with. And for some of you, you're using your journal that way, right? And express the anger. Don't repress the anger. There's a truth to that. This is another theme of ours from all of this, is that everything you feel is real and valid. The stories that we tell about it, those often have a lot less reality. They're kind of secondary. They're put on top. And it's those stories that we have to be really careful with, right? And so in that last question, when we go into, oh man, that person's such a jerk, blah, 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 express the truth of the anger of it, but realize that, and you can even say they're the villain. You can say all that, you can let it out, but then leave that. Let that be a practice space, not your whole reality. You don't then carry that story around with you as some ultimate truth. Don't try to pin that person into that role forever, but it's absolutely okay to express from a place of victim to a place of villain. That's okay. It's natural. Otherwise, it wouldn't be coming up in all of these different traditions, Western, Eastern, throughout time. Okay, question. If we celebrate the hero, don't we encourage them to stay in that role? Maybe the same with the villain. If we give them space, we encourage them being a villain. And that's a great question. Really, really great question. And maybe some of what I just said kind of answers it, which is, on the one hand, these flavors of love, they're not permanent. These abodes, they're called abodes often, which I love, because they're really emotional spaces that we enter. And any emotional space that I enter, someone can enter with me, like a house, and we can hang out there together, right? And so I could get a friend and we could go into anger and an anger abode together and get all our anger out and then walk out that door. But the idea is we don't actually stay in any of these emotional states. None of them are permanent. We might say love is, but that it shape shifts for different situations. And so, so if I'm responding to somebody being a hero with celebration, am I encouraging them? On the one hand, yes, absolutely. I think there's different ways of encouraging, though, because we want to encourage aspects of that hero. We want to encourage people responding with wisdom and care. We want to encourage people stepping up, including ourselves. This is the number one person we're encouraging. And you guys know this from a lot of people are really struggling right now. And one of the main things I'm helping people remind people to do is to celebrate when they do get up and do their meditation practice. Because if we don't celebrate that, it leaves that part of us going, hang on, I just did a thing. And was it worth it? Was it noticed? These flavors of love help us feel seen. And so we can encourage someone in having done what they've just done without telling them stay there. Right? And how do we balance that? I mean, okay, I'm somebody who grew up with so much positive reinforcement around being an achiever. And it's interesting, my mom and I are so close now. And we've talked about a lot of this, but something that she brought up, she said, I really shouldn't have praised you quite so much for when you were shiny. And I didn't know how to deal with it when you were suffering. And so I didn't give enough support in those moments. I didn't give enough light to those moments. And I gave too much light to these other moments. And so I think the idea is to let that naturally arise, but don't let it become this kind of coercion thing with other people where we're giving them treats, and trying to make them do certain behaviors. And yeah, when we apply equanimity to the villain, now that's a really good question, because we don't want to just let people be assholes, and to set us on fire and to create a world of pain and suffering for others. And justice is really, really an important thing. The idea that everyone's and accountability is so, so important. But I think what I'm saying maybe is we can call people out. We can celebrate people for good behavior, and for positive behavior, for being generous, without labeling them as a hero. Maybe that's what it is, without putting them on a pedestal above others. And we can call out selfishness, lack of integrity, lack of accountability, causing suffering in others, etc. We can call all that out without putting someone below us and labeling them a victim and slapping that on them as if that is a core aspect of their identity. I mean, and that's what it really comes down to. We're not trying to take away options for being a human. We're saying that we're not stuck in any of them. And we're not trying to take away any of the flavors of experience. Instead, we're actually, what we're really doing is just taking away the hierarchy and the judgment. I'm a hero, so I get a place up here. I'm a darling, I get a place up here. You are a villain or a victim, and you get a place down here. That goes away. That exists nowhere in nature. It's all interconnected and shifting and relating and passing resources. You're never going to dig up, an artifact of that kind of hierarchy that exists only in humans' minds. And it's that kind of judgment that keeps us striving to climb to the top over other people. And that's what causes our suffering. Okay, last question, then I have a couple of quotes for you guys. I could probably take one more, but I have one more in the chat. If my responding with equanimity keeps me okay, even if I wish there was a different love, would it be suffering to stay in that response? Oh, that's so interesting. So upeksha is equanimity in Sanskrit. And I find that equanimity naturally will shift into a different flavor of love on its own. if you let it, but that it's a really, really great starting space. And we also don't know how long these processes take, meaning I had to be in an angry abode with my ex for a while in order to get that separateness, right? And entered into a state of equanimity for a while around that. And these days I respond with something that's a little bit more like a tenderness, compassion even, right? Did I want to immediately experience compassion? Yes. Did I want to immediately feel like all, nice about that? Yeah. But I wasn't in charge of that timeline, actually. And it really had to just go through the process that it went through. And if you're experiencing equanimity, celebrate that. It's a wonderful place to be. Okay, so here's just a little wisdom from Nisargadatta on all of this. He says, you suffer because you have alienated yourself from reality, and now you seek an escape from this alienation. You cannot escape from your own obsessions. You can only cease nurturing them. So this is this reminder that, we all want connection, and that the question isn't so much trying to create that, manufacture connection, right? It's about seeing the ways that we've taken ourselves out of connection. We're actually already in connection. That's how you're breathing. That's how you're here, hearing, seeing, feeling. Acknowledging that we've done the alienating, that we've separated ourselves. And how do we separate ourselves? With our obsessions, with our stories, with our ideas. I have been obsessed my whole life with this story of Aaron and the identity of Aaron and how can I prove to everyone that I am as great as this idea of Aaron that I have. And then that idea of Aaron, that identity of Aaron, ends up building boundaries around me and others. Rather than letting them see me just as I am and all of my fullness and wholeness, I'm worried, I'm concerned about promoting a certain image. And instead of being able to fully see somebody else, I'm pretty into, I really rather you interact with me in a way that promotes my image of me. Oh, you don't feel like that today? Or you're having your own thing today? I'm gonna go find somebody else who's gonna play with me a little bit more, right? That's how we stay out of connection. And here's another lovely quote from him. Some of you have heard this before. Let go of your attachment to the unreal, and the real will swiftly and smoothly step into its own. Stop imagining yourself being or doing this or that, and the realization that you are the source and the heart of all will dawn on you. With this will come great love, which is not choice or predilection or attachment, but a power which makes all things love-worthy and lovable. So here's a response from Lee. The explanation of the previous question reminds me of the SB2 feedback model. I'm not sure if I said that right, or SBII feedback model. An X situation, when you exhibit Y behavior, it has Z impact on me, the team. Observing rather than you are Y, I see. Yes. Yeah, the looking at the behavior. Yeah, looking at the behavior, SBII. Okay, cool. Yeah. When you do this, right? When you come home and slam the door, it jars me out of my calm state, right? It has this effect. And so you're, rather than saying, you always disrupt me, right? For instance, just to kind of put that together for what Lee was writing about. Yeah. And that's a really, really important part of nonviolent communication in that modality, and other healing modalities that have to do with how we relate to other people. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And anytime that we're trying to label someone and pin them into some position, whatever that position is, good or bad, we are right there taking away their sacred right to self-define. Everyone has that right to self-define, right? It's coming up in the trans community right now, right? Everyone should be able to say, this is me, right? I get to apply labels to myself. That being said, in our relationships, we can and have to, right, be able to say, this is how it affects me. And to go back to what I was saying before, the meditator starts with awareness. The enlightenment journey starts with awareness. Inner awareness to be able to say how it affects me. When I hear that door slam and I'm already, and I'm in my mode, I could, and you might describe just to describe exactly how it feels in your body, right? But these are ways of taking it back into direct experience and starting to share reality with this person again, rather than saying, I want you to come into my reality where I have labeled you as such. We can share a reality where I have some feelings. Let me see what those are. Okay. You've got some feelings. Tell me what those are. And then here we are, we're starting to reconnect again, rejoin each other in a shared space of reality. That's great. So Lee says it goes situation, behavior, impact, inquiry. I love it. Oh, those are the two I's, impact and inquiry. I get it now. And the last step is, how does that feel for you? I love that. Great. Great. And I'm getting some notes if this has been helpful. I'm so glad. We're going to wrap it up here. Last couple words are just about preparing for May and June. We have just entered Taurus season. This is a sign of the zodiac that is associated with the body, with earth, right? Earth element, with sort of pleasure. And that's perfect because as we kick off the chakras journey in early May, the first thing that we're going to be doing is looking at our physical body and our home space. And so that's just a little homework assignment, gently nudging you toward over these next couple of weeks as we get prepared for that big quest. To start paying attention to your home space, to start making it, cleaning things, doing a little spring cleaning, getting things to feel really cozy and pleasant and nice. Things that are aesthetically pleasing, let yourself drift toward them and start to find that sense inside, right? Of what does it feel like? What is pleasantness and comfort and contentedness? What is yes? Not like this crazy, elated, manic yes, but just a nice, gentle, daily, moment by moment yes. So I'm going to be asking you guys to start cultivating that as we move toward the chakra work. All right. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for any questions that you asked. And I'll see you all very soon.